you will not run out of air. That's the first thing people get wrong. You picture yourself clawing at wood in the dark, waiting for the oxygen to run out. It doesn't happen like that. The oxygen is still there when you stop moving, still there when you stop thinking, still sitting quietly in that box hours after you're gone. Something else takes you, and you make it yourself, with every breath, on purpose, without ever stopping. In 1829, a German doctor built a machine to save you from it. Cords tied to your fingers, a brass bell standing in the grass above your grave. Hold on to that bell. We come back to it. You wake up. Not slowly. The dark isn't bedroom dark. It's zero. Your pupils open all the way and find nothing to open for. The lid is 25 centimeters from your face. Your elbows touch the sides. The air tastes of varnish and fabric and breath that has already been used once. And it's cold. 2 meters down, the ground sits near 10 degrees Celsius all year, summer, and winter. You are inside a thermos. Your hands come up. They hit wood. That's the second your body understands. But the lid is not your problem. What's on top of it is. Above you is roughly 2 cubic meters of backfilled soil. Dry earth weighs about 1,300 kilograms per cubic meter. Wet clay weighs far more, 2 to 3 tons, resting on your chest through a plank. And in most American cemeteries, there's a second layer nobody pictures. A concrete grave liner, a box weighing close to a ton, lowered over your coffin by machine so the ground doesn't collapse when the wood finally gives. The movie version, punching through the lid, swimming up through loose dirt, isn't difficult. It's geometrically impossible. Sealed. And none of that is what kills you either. Ordinary air is 21% oxygen and 0.04% carbon dioxide. What leaves your lungs is 4 to 5% CO2, 100 times more. Every breath you exhale in that box stays in that box. You push it out, you breathe it back in. The number climbs. That's the real clock, not oxygen falling, but carbon dioxide rising. CO2 dissolves in water and becomes acid. Your blood is water. The fluid around your brain is water. The pH starts to drop. Deep in your brainstem, in a strip called the medulla, sit central chemoreceptors, cells whose entire job is to taste that acid and demand air. At 5% CO2, you feel like you are drowning on dry land. Skull pounding, chest heaving outside your control. At 8 to 10%, vision breaks apart, you convulse, and you stop. Nobody in a coffin dies of no air. You die of your own exhale, yourself, and the alarm that fires when it starts is not the one you'd expect. In 2013, University of Iowa, Justin Feinstein and his colleagues published a result in Nature Neuroscience that broke a textbook. Their subject is known in the literature as SM. A rare genetic disease called Urbach-Vitha had destroyed both of her amygdalae, calcified them out of her brain. SM did not feel fear. She handled snakes. She laughed at the actors in haunted houses. She had been held at knife point and reported no terror at all. So, the prediction was obvious. Frighten her from the inside, and she would feel nothing. They gave her one breath of 35% carbon dioxide. She grabbed at the mask, gasping, saying she couldn't breathe. The first panic attack of her life. They repeated it with twin sisters carrying the same lesion. Same result. All 3 amygdala patients panicked. Of 12 healthy volunteers breathing the same gas, only 3 did. Without a fear center, the panic came harder. Because the suffocation alarm doesn't live in the fear center. It's older than that. It sits underneath, wired straight into the chemistry of your blood, which means there is no version of you that stays calm in that box. Not with training, not with 20 years of meditation. That switches under the floorboards of your personality. Older. So you scream. Everyone screams. At rest, you make about 200 milliliters of carbon dioxide a minute. Thrashing, hammering, screaming, you can push that 5 to 10 times higher. Every scream is a deposit into the exact thing killing you. Your rescue attempt is the execution, and nobody hears it. Soil is one of the finest sound absorbers on the planet. Loose, porous, endlessly deep. 2 meters of it turns a scream into nothing before it reaches the grass. Silence. Meanwhile, in the dark, your brain refuses to sit still. In 2004, Harvard Medical School, Lotfi Marabet and Alvaro Pascual Leones sealed 13 healthy-sighted volunteers into blindfolds for 96 hours. 10 of the 13 began hallucinating. First bright spots, then faces, landscapes, ornate buildings none of them had ever seen. They knew it wasn't real. They saw it anyway. The visual cortex will not accept an empty channel. Starve it, and it starts generating. In the lab that took about a day. In a coffin, chemistry hurries it. As CO2 rises, your vision narrows, lights bloom at the edges, and thinking goes slow and dreamlike. So the last thing you see will not be blackness. Your own brain will paint the inside of the lid. Light. And here is what nobody expects about the length of it. In 2007, Baylor College of Medicine, Chess Stetson, Matthew Fiesta, and David Eagleman dropped volunteers backwards off a 31-meter tower into a net. About 3 seconds of genuine terror. Wearing a wrist display flickering numbers slightly too fast for a human eye. If fear truly slowed perception, they would have read those numbers. Not one person could. But afterwards, every one of them estimated their own fall as 36% longer than the falls they had watched. Terror doesn't slow time down. It writes memory more densely. And dense memory feels long when you look back at it, which leads somewhere strange. That endlessness we imagine in the box is a property of remembering it, and nobody remembers it. So how long, really? A sealed coffin holds a couple of 100 liters of usable air. Lying perfectly still, you'd have hours. You will not be lying perfectly still. CO2 reaches distress levels within tens of minutes. Consciousness usually goes before the hour is out. The heart follows. Not days of clawing, not one long night. 1 hour. And that single hour is exactly why the bell never worked. In 1829, Johann Gottfried Taberger ran cords from the hands, feet, and head of the corpse up to a bell mounted above the grave. In 1843, Baltimore, Christian Eisenbrandt patented a spring-loaded lid built to fly open at the slightest movement of a hand. In 1868, Newark, New Jersey, Franz Vester, patent number 81,437, a square tube to the surface with a ladder inside it, a cord placed in your palm, a bell at the top. He had himself buried in front of a crowd and climbed out an hour later to applause. More than 100 of these patents were granted in America in the 19th century, over 30 in Germany alone. And there is no documented case of any of them ever saving a single human being. Not one bell, because every one of them was designed for a story. A calm person, awake for hours, waiting politely, holding a cord. The real body panics in seconds, spends its air in minutes, and is unconscious before the watchman finishes his round. The engineering was excellent. The physiology was fiction. Silent. Today, in most of the West, this has effectively stopped. Embalming, refrigeration, concrete vaults, monitors that scream when your heart does anything at all. But the mistake didn't disappear. It moved indoors. In 2020, Southfield, Michigan, Timesha Beauchamp, 20 years old, declared dead in her home by paramedics. She spent roughly 2 hours zipped inside a body bag. A funeral home worker opened it to prepare her for embalming and found her looking back at him, breathing. In 2023, Babahoyo, Ecuador, Bella Montoya, 76, declared dead after cardiac arrest. 5 hours into her own wake, with 20 relatives in the room, the coffin began knocking from the inside. There's a clinical name for the mechanism: autoresuscitation, the Lazarus phenomenon, a heart restarting on its own after CPR has been stopped. In a 2020 review led by Linda Gordon, surveys of intensive care and emergency physicians found that between 37 and 50% of them had personally watched it happen, which is why the guidance now is to keep watching a body for 10 full minutes after you stop trying. Death isn't a moment, it's a verdict, and verdicts can be wrong. Nobody has ever measured a human being's final hour inside a sealed coffin. Every number here comes from CO2 chambers, mine collapses, submarine escape training, and respiratory physiology, not from graves. The Victorian statistics are worse. William Tebb's 1896 campaign book counted 219 near burials and 149 real ones, collected by a man whose life's mission was proving exactly that. And the classic evidence, scratches inside a lid, a body found turned over, isn't evidence. Decomposition swells and shifts a corpse. Trapped gas moves limbs. Floods, animals, and reburials disturb graves. The fear was always bigger than the data. But the fear isn't stupid. It's just aimed at the wrong century. Taberger's bell failed, and not because the engineering was bad. It failed because it assumed the alarm belonged outside, up in the grass, bolted to a post, waiting for a stranger to hear it. It doesn't. It's already installed. That small ancient patch of brainstem that starts screaming at the first sour taste of your own breath, the one that made a woman with no fear center tear a mask off her face, has been standing watch inside you since before your species had a name. It has never taken a night off. You have never once had to remember to breathe. Right now it's reading the air. It's satisfied. That's the only reason you can't feel it. Every moment of your life, something in the dark inside you is listening for one thing: whether you are still getting air. That's your bell. It has been ringing since the day you were born, and every quiet breath you don't notice is the sound of it saying, "Not yet. Human."